Hey everybody, it's Ryan from Pie Records. I'm here with Chris Mason of Dirt Cult Records. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Ryan. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no,
I'm excited to talk to you today.
me
Yeah,
too. Me too. Let's dig right in and tell me a little bit about what Dirt Nap Records is for our viewers and for people who you think might be interested in checking you out.
sure. So, Dirt Cold. And it's funny that you said Dirt Nap, which is funny
Oh my God.
because
Let me
no,
start.
it's okay. I think it's funny that you started with that, just because I was going to say not to be confused with Dirt Nap, because
Oh my
Ken
God.
and myself are buddies, and actually one of my bands, Low Culture, has released records on Dirt Nap, and I've released some band. There's some overlap in terms of the label, so um, he started first, and so I accidentally stole half of his name, I guess. But yeah, so no, that's just funny. It's a common thing that happens. But yeah, I mean, a little bit about Dirt Cole. I started the label actually right before we went on. I was trying to figure out, like, when did I start it? I think it started in 2006, 2007. If I went back on Discogs, I think the first release was probably early in the year 2007. I actually started it in Las Cruces, New Mexico. That's where I was living at the time. And it was mainly an avenue to release my own band's new 7 inch. Like, we didn't know who was going to do it. And I was like, hey, I've always wanted to start a label. So, if I mess it up, I might as well mess it up by releasing one of my own band's stuff. Released the 7 inch, it went well, started making connections through touring and whatever else, and then things just kind of snowballed from there, and here I am, what, 15 plus years later, continuing to release stuff now. Yeah, now based out of Portland, Oregon, for about the past 7 years. So yeah.
Well, I apologize for getting the name wrong. I tried to make a conscious effort to say it correctly, and I think it's
It
because
messed you up, right?
I'm
I,
I'm waiting for an email back from Dirt Nap. Actually,
I released all the Marked Men LPs on tape several years ago, and Ken and I reached out and I was like, "Hey, can I do this?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, of course." And he was like, "And I'm going to take a lot." And then we realized that we probably should have just done a split release and made a new label called, like, Colt Nap or something, but we hindsight's 2020, I guess. We figured that
yeah.
out afterwards, but yeah.
So tell me a little bit about how you choose bands, the genres you may be interested in, and maybe something that you might do that's out of your comfort zone that is really interesting.
Um, yeah, I don't really have a I mean, that's such an interesting question, because I don't know if I have the answer. Like, there's so many different ways, right? I mean, the bottom line is I release things that I like. And I think that one of the things I've been told in the past, and looking back on, like, my back catalog, I think is true, is that a lot of times I tend to be the label that kind of takes a chance on a band that's, like, brand new, hasn't released anything else. I think a lot of that is function of, like, wanting to release things that I'm excited about, and also releasing things that may not otherwise be represented, on another label or something like that. So, I mean, it's kind of a combination of, like, just releasing my friends' records, and releasing records from the bands that I've been excited about, when touring throughout the country, when we could tour, and throughout the world. Um, but I also think, there have certainly been times where someone just randomly sends me, like, a SoundCloud link, and I fall in love, and it's happened that way as well. So I think, like, at the end of the day, it's just like, when the opportunity arises, am I excited enough about this to pump a few $1,000s into trying to get this out into the world? Yeah.
That's good to
Um, but I mean, I go ahead.
oh, I just said that's the way I approach a release too. It just so happens the two releases I'm doing are surfy, but uh something that grabs my attention. I don't go by genres.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things I was going to say. I mean, when you talk about comfort levels, I mean, I've released. I mean, I think that it's safe to say that Dirt Cult is, primarily a punk label. But I don't think that if you were to, go to Bandcamp and like listen to like every Dirt Cult release, that you could find much of a common thread, all the time between bands, because I think that like and I don't know how that I've always wondered like how that serves me, I guess, because I'd probably be better off with like, a Dirt Cult sound that I really like, seek out. But I mean, the truth of the matter is that like I'm a fan of music, and I like a lot of different stuff. So I mean, I've released hardcore records, I've released pop punk records, garage rock records, power pop records, all the way to like a shoegaze record from a band from Serbia, like uh and I think, I've seen in like the blogosphere or whatever, like people saying like, oh, I can really depend on Dirt Cult when they release some kind of melodic punk record, but I can't get behind like the hardcore stuff or whatever. And I'm like,
Yeah.
so some people might find that not consistent, I guess, but it's really just a product of like, I like what I like, and I don't want to pigeonhole myself to a particular genre, I guess.
Good. That's good. That's good to hear. I mean, I think that's a positive. Um, I think when you lend a variety of titles, I think that kind of gives you more room to breathe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that used to be normal too. I think I feel or more normal. I think that especially having moved to Portland 7 years ago, I mean, one of the things that I kind of started to recognize, was that like, I mean, this is like Punk City, USA. There's so many punks here. There's so many bands always playing, so many venues, etc. And um, the scene's really siloed, interestingly, though. Like there's not a lot of overlap between, and if you have a mixed band bill here, people will kind of be scratching their heads going, this band doesn't sound exactly like that band. You could live your life in Portland and go to plenty of shows if you just like Japanese D beat, essentially. Uh, and all when shows were a thing, I would find myself going to shows of a variety of different genres, and I always knew who I was going to see at those shows, but I also knew who I wouldn't see at those shows. If I want to see those people and meet up with those people, I got to go to this kind of show. They'll be there, but I don't know. I mean, I I don't really live by that like siloed approach, I guess. Especially in terms of like I enjoy what I enjoy. So yeah.
So what do you have going on recently? I'm sure you've had a lot of time to work on some releases. So what have you been working on? What bands have you been working on? And like, are you putting out vinyl, CDs, or digital?
So I pretty much only do vinyl and tapes, and then digital stuff as well. You know, kind of found myself in this situation in 2019. I think was probably our heaviest release date ever. I think I released something like 19 records and tapes or something like that. It was a lot. And then what happened in 2020 was really like, I mean, it started out in January with the Apollo lacquer fire. I don't know if you remember that, but essentially the only lacquer plant
Yeah.
in the United States burned to the ground. So started 2001 out with a bang. Didn't know, we would be living through a pandemic and everything else, but it provided me, I guess, with an opportunity to kind of scale back and kind of recognize I don't have to say yes to everything. So in 2000, it was actually coming off of my heaviest release year ever was my lightest release year ever, kind of a combination of Apollo lacquer fires happening and then the pandemic. I released 2 7-inches, one from an Uneasy Piece, which is like Stan Wright from Death Threat, Signal Lost, Arctic Flowers, and his project, essentially kind of a one-off project with Lance Hahn from J Church and Cringer, that was recorded a few years before Lance's death, that never saw the light of day. Stan's a friend, Mike, who played drums in that band, and Dave, who played bass in that band, are all friends. And Stan approached me about doing it, and I jumped at the opportunity. Released a record from Primitive Teeth out of Chicago, and then 2 LPs, one from Era Bleak from here in town, Daydream from here in town, and then 1 tape, The Yearners, and then a digital release, which was just my quarantine project called Inject the Light, which was basically just me, a guitar and a drum machine and a bass, like recording songs about our current state of affairs.
Yeah.
So it was like not a heavy year at all, and I'm really trying to kind of carry that over into 2021, because even though I didn't release all that many records, financially I did a lot better, because I wasn't sinking all of my money into release after release after release. So this year, right now, I've got the Neighborhood Brats. Their new LP is at the plant. Needles and Pins, their 4th LP is at the plant. Band from here called Bothers. I released their first LP, and they're in the studio right now recording a second one. And a 12-inch from a new band from Vancouver called Schedule One, scheduled for a bit later in the year. And I've done a couple tapes. That Inject the Light I talked about, that was digital only, I went ahead and did a tape of that. And then Modern Cynics, which is Maddie Grace, her quarantine project in Canada. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there'll be things that I might add here and there, but I'm trying to keep it light and just like do a good job of releasing the records that I do have and really getting them out into the world.
When
Yeah.
when you choose to put a tape out, now I know those are coming back uh kind of pretty big. How do you decide what you're gonna put on tape?
Um, well, I mean, the cool thing about tapes is really, one, turnaround, right? Like you can do it so quickly, and I think two, that they're cheap. And I mean, this isn't my job, this is supplemented by like the work I do, and like so yeah, I guess I just say that because I mean there's times where like I just don't have the money, like I really like something, but I don't have the money to put it out on maybe what's the preferred format, like an LP or whatever. But hey, I can sink $150 or whatever it is to make 100 tapes and try to get it out in the world. So sometimes it's just a matter of like money at
Yeah,
the end of
right.
the day. But I do like tapes. I think, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I can sell tapes all that well, but I like
Yeah.
them.
I remember
And then
that was the preferred method in the early 90s when I was in bands and stuff like that. Everybody had a tape.
Well, and I mean the other thing is too is that like I mean 7 inches used to be like I mean could essentially be like a demo tape. They were
Yeah.
cheap to create, so like I mean you could slap something on a 7 inch in the 80s or 90s or whatever for not a lot of money, um, and sell them for cheap. But like these days, like I mean a 7 inch, it's less than an LP, at the end of the day, but it's not like that much less.
Yeah.
It's a pretty significant commitment of money. So I don't know. Why not do a tape?
Yeah. Yeah. So you're located in Portland and you have uh quite a few releases. Um where where can people find these releases, and how can people contact you?
Um, yeah. So I mean, I do have a website, dirtcultrecords.com, where people can find it. Also a Bandcamp page, dirtcultrecords.bandcamp.com, where you can stream everything, digitally download it. There's also physical releases there. I've got, all of my releases are available on Discogs too, directly through me. And then, I mean, most digital outlets, unless, Spotify, iTunes Music, whatever. I mean, most of my stuff's there. I think, there are bands that make a conscious decision that I totally respect not to put records on that format. And if they don't want to do that, that's fine. So not everything's up there. But yeah, I mean, the stuff's pretty easy to find. I think like you want to just see kind of an overview of what the label's been doing more or less like for the past, however many years. I mean, Bandcamp has almost all of our releases up. Yeah.
And you said when you go on tour, what's your band called?
Well, so my most recent bands, though, I mean, who knows if they're bands anymore, just given everything going on in the world, are a band called Low Culture, which is myself and Joe Ayub from Markman, Jake Astaldi, who's been in like Leonard's Innards, Moto, a ton of other bands, and my friend Sam. We're kind of, I mean, we were always a fairly inactive band, or not, I wouldn't say always, but the past several years, we've been a pretty inactive band anyway, because Jay and myself live here in Portland, but Sam lives in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and Joe lives in El Paso, Texas. So we played a show in Seattle and a show in Portland in early 2020 with these plans to do a Midwest tour around the Dirt Nap 20th anniversary, and we were going to go out to the Bay Area and do some shows with like Marked Men and Dillinger 4, but all of that fell apart. None of it happened. But I guess we'll never not be a band. We'll play when we can, get together when we can, and also a band that was active pretty much up until the pandemic was Macho Boys, like a feminist hardcore band here in all of us based in Portland. But I don't know. I was just talking to a friend, Mike from Dead Broke, the other day, and he was talking about going to band practice, and I was like, this is the first time in my life that I haven't been in a band, let alone 5 bands at the same time. So strange.
So before we sign off, I want to give you an opportunity to maybe explain a little bit more about the diversity of your label, and the releases you have started out with as compared to now.
Yeah. That is funny, because even as I was saying that, I think that even though I've always been kind of like a toe dipped in this or that, definitely over the years there's been a bit of a progression and maybe a bit of a different focus. Just because, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I was gonna say that my interest and my taste can change year to year, but it's probably fair to say that they can kind of change day to day depending on how I'm feeling. But I think if you look at like the early Dirt Cult releases, the first couple of years, I mean, we were pretty heavily focused on like, what would probably be described like as, kind of in the pop punk realm or whatever. I think a lot of that was just based on the fact that like I was in a pop punk band at the time that was actively touring, and those were the bands that we were playing with, and the friends that we were making along the way. But I think, just over the years, I don't know. I mean, I think things have shifted, I guess. I mean, maybe towards more of a like kind of garage rock, melodic hardcore. So I don't know, you know, or maybe just a more emphasis on the punk, I guess, than the pop or something. I don't know. It's been a progression, but it's always more of a function of like who I'm hanging out with and who's like in front of me and like what I'm feeling, I guess. You know, what's kind of hitting me and what's not. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm I'm 40 now, I guess. Like, you know, there aren't as many pop punk bands that grab me the way they maybe did when I was like in my late 20s or early 30s for whatever reason. um,
So what was the scene like in your previous town? Was it New Mexico? In New
yeah, so I lived in Las Cruces, New Mexico for about 13 years. It was small kind of border town. It's about 45 minutes from El Paso, Texas. Southern New Mexico, right on I-10. Um, and I moved there my second year of college, basically just to go to college, and I kind of wanted to move west. So I ended up out there. I'd say when I showed up there, there was like basically, I mean, no scene to speak of. There was nothing going on. It was just a sleepy, I mean, there was, I would hesitate to even call it a college town. Like it was this weird juxtaposition of like, there's college students there part of the year, but it's mainly like this kind of sleepy retirement town. Um, but I think one of the things that was like so amazing about Las Cruces is that there was a real opportunity there, an unrealized opportunity to kind of build a scene um, within that town. And I think that, you know, it's fair to say that my friends and myself kind of, you know, did it. Like it's really where I kind of cut my teeth in terms of like DIY, you know, the DIY approach. We were uniquely situated where El Paso didn't have a lot going on. Like when I was living there, I'm sure you remember like at the drive-in and Sparta, like
Yeah.
those bands had blown up and they were from El Paso. So basically, like if you didn't sound like at the drive-in and Sparta in El Paso at that time, people would walk out of your show. Like there was just like that is what they wanted, you know, and that was the scene. That was all that was there. So what happened was it left bands with basically making this decision about like either you're gonna play Las Cruces or you're gonna drive, you know, what, 16 hours from Phoenix to, you know, Austin, I guess. Um, so we're kind of uniquely situated to be able to like get really great quality bands to play our houses, our, you know, practice spaces, you know, a coffee shop, a record store, just like wherever we could. And I think that, you know, it was incredibly exciting for a very long time. Like, I mean, there were people that would consistently come through and people saying like, this is like the new kind of like, you know, Chattanooga or the new like Asheville or whatever. Like people were really excited about it and just like, it was a great scene for a while. I think so that's all well and good, but I think what ended up happening for me was that as I got older, um, it was difficult for me to live within a scene where like so much stuff fell on your shoulders. Like if the band's gonna get booked, it's gonna be me, you know, and I gotta make the flyer and promote the show. I've gotta run the door. And while I'm running the door, I've got to make sure that the PA is working, you know. My band's probably playing the show because there aren't very many bands in town. I got to make sure that people have a place to stay, you know, or it was just all falling on my shoulders. And I think it was burning me out. And part of, not the only like impetus, I guess, for moving to Portland was just like, I kind of want to go someplace where it doesn't all fall on my shoulders. Like I still want to be involved and I love this, but this is burning me out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. That was kind of how that happened. And you know, I was kind of at a point where I was like, you know, there's all these kids going to shows or whatever. If they want to continue this, if this is important for them, it's really time for them to kind of step up and make it happen. Like I'm old. I can't do this anymore.
So, if you don't mind me asking, you said you went there to go to college. What did you go to college for?
I went to college for social work. So I got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in social work.
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
And that would, I mean, I'm guessing that that ties into your background with the scene. You know, you're involved with the community.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, I think that the thing that like early on really inspired me, to basically become a punk or whatever, and get involved in the scene was really like community. I mean, I remember like in Las Cruces getting interviewed by someone around why do you think like a music scene is important in Las Cruces, and I was like, the truth of the matter is I really don't. I think that what's important is like community building, and the music scene is kind of a means to that end, if that makes sense. Yes, I love music. Yes, I love to go to shows. I love, hanging with my friends, but it all feels kind of shallow, I guess, if there's not a sense of community and a sense of purpose around that, So, I mean, I always did kind of have like a sense that like, involvement in the punk scene can be kind of in some ways a different form of like social work, I guess, or an extension of it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, and it never was really, I mean, all that said, I mean, I think at the end of the day, like, what it became is like people drinking and partying, whereas I would have loved to see like, uh, book distro, zine and book distro, like community potlucks. I mean, I think there were times we were trying to do like community, kickball games and stuff like that, but like, never were able to kind of sustain that sort of stuff. And at the end of the day, it became about like drinking, partying, and like, just having a good time. And that's fine, but, a little bit discouraging.
a little
um,
bit more to
and,
do.
and not always, what's that?
A little bit more to do than just that.
Yeah, it's a little bit, yeah. I mean, I guess like yeah, it's not what I envisioned. Like when I think about punk and when I think about like subcultures like punk, I mean I really do think that like the the political social aspect of all of that is incredibly important, and it's discouraging at times to see it become like just like a frat party, I guess, but again, I think maybe another reason where it was like, it's time to mix it up. It's time for a change, maybe need to go somewhere where this is already happening. And I can kind of join a scene rather than trying to create something, or sustain something.
That says a lot about uh, your ethics. I think it speaks to it speaks to community, but not only that, but representing the music in a communal manner. What is your MO? Like what is your something that you pride yourself on and your mission basically?
I mean, I think that over the past, I think it shifts, I guess. But I think that one of the things that I've been kind of focused on over the past several years has been trying to, as much as possible, release bands that, have people of different genders, of, different sexual preferences, or whatever it may be, underrepresented people within the community. Um, so I think that that is another thing that kind of plays into oftentimes my decision about a release. that's not to say, I mean, certainly you could look at my catalog and go, well, you just released a band with like four men in it, four white dudes, 2 years ago or whatever. And like, yeah. I mean, I liked it. They're good people, and I appreciated their message. But I mean, I think that's, I mean, one of the things that I've really at least tried to be more caution or more intentional about in terms of my decision making process with the label. Let's say, well, I mean, one of the things that I would really, I didn't say was like of different, racial backgrounds. I would love for there to be more BIPOC representation on this label. Uh, and that's probably an area where I've fallen a bit short, up until this point. But yeah, I mean, when you ask me that question, there's a lot of stuff going in my head, because I think that there are things that I try to be intentional about, and then at the end of the day too, I'm kind of like, well, this is just like an addiction almost. Like releasing records is just like I can't not.
Yeah.
It's thankless behind the scenes work, but I really enjoy doing it, and I honestly think that like kind of sustaining this label throughout the pandemic has been really beneficial for my mental health, because I'm connected to something that other people are not able to connect with in the same way right now, something that's important to me, Um, so there's some selfish, I guess, kind of motivations behind that as well. But I mean, I think they're important. Like we've all got to take care of ourselves right
Yeah.
now. And the label feels like one way I'm taking care of myself.
I 100% identify with that because if I'm idle, I'll get anxiety. So I have to do
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have to be working on something. So I pretty much work on Pi Records. Basically, I do this mostly for my mental health, but also music has always been that thing that helps me relax and not go crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I totally get that.
Yeah, you're probably like me. I've tried to give myself like some grace, I guess, in like as I get older, like, but like in my younger years, like if I spent one night just like binge watching a television show, I'd be like, what the fuck am I doing? I'm like wasting my life. And like now I've just got to be like, it's one night, like let yourself relax. Like that's self-care too,
Yeah.
but I'm the same way. I mean, it's, like when I was talking about not having a band, like that's something that's really difficult right now, because it's like, it's just always been something to do. And I don't
Yeah.
have that. But without the label, like, I don't know what I would be doing with my time. Probably just going crazy.
Are in Portland right now? Are you guys? Are you doing as much as you can from home, or like what is the state of the pandemic there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the things that I can say is that I'm in a unique position, a really fortunate position within my current like day job, essentially, where I was already working from home. There was some travel that was kind of wrapped in to my current position, but it was intermediate. It was kind of spotty in here or there. Like I was gone maybe 3 days out of a month or something like that. Um, so I've always worked from home, or have at least for the past like I guess coming up on 8 years or so now in this position. Um, so it didn't, that part of my life didn't change dramatically. And I'll continue to work from home after the pandemic's over.
Yeah.
Just might travel some more. But in terms of like Portland right now, I mean, I think I think Oregon's doing pretty well. I mean, we definitely spiked with the rest of the country, the past couple of months. But even that spike wasn't as big of a spike as you see in other areas. Now we're back down to like 300 to 400 new cases a day. which is nice. Who knows what'll happen with these variants? But I mean, it's
Yeah.
something's working. We're in a lull. Um, and places are open, but I think that I don't know. I mean, people seem to be relatively like considerate and cautious here. I mean, I have been fortunate enough not to experience what many of my friends throughout the country have experienced in terms of like some anti-masker, like
Yeah.
screaming in their face about whatever, the Chinese virus or whatever. I mean,
Oh my.
it's
Yeah.
um it's I mean I think that I mean I'm gonna say I won't see people with their masks like they go into a store and then they pull it off after they see that they're wearing it and walk around, but like people aren't. But Portland's kind of passive aggressive, so I guess in this particular sense like the passive aggressiveness kind of serves us. Not a lot of people are being too confrontational about it in that regard.
Well, that's
But
good.
yeah, so I mean, it's okay, but like, it's definitely not like life is
No,
usual. It's not business as usual by any means. What about there? Where are you located? Are you in New York?
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
How's,
soon.
how's,
I work in sports television for my day or night job, uh, and I think they're going to start letting fans back into the stands soon. I personally am going to get my vaccine in 2 weeks, so
Ooh,
I'm not going to
lucky
care.
you.
I'm not going to care either way.
Yeah.
But
I work with oh, sorry, as a part of my position, I just work with so many social workers who are getting the vaccine right now, and I'm so jealous of all of them. So good for you. I'm glad you're gonna get that.
I'm lucky. I'm lucky in the fact that my job doesn't. I can work from home some days, but for the most part, people are called in, and like I can't see like how good would that look if I said, well, I don't feel comfortable coming in, so I'm kind of stuck.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's I don't know. It's weird times. This is also incredibly hard to navigate. And I don't know. I mean, as much as I would like to go to a show, I think about how uncomfortable I would likely be in that environment. Like even when we're past this, just like I mean, aside from in the past year, aside from attending some, protests and direct actions or whatever in Portland, like I have not been in a large crowd of people in a very long time. So it's gonna be interesting. But yeah.
oh, that's interesting that you say that because you mentioned the protests. Do you have any experience with firsthand experience with what was going on there in the summer?
Um Yeah, I mean, I can speak to what my experience is and kind of what I know. I mean, I think one of the things I should probably say is that in terms of my involvement and like the day-to-day involvement and what was going on in terms of the protest, I mean, it wasn't much. I have a 4-year-old at home, and am trying to be as COVID conscious as possible as well. So, um, I certainly wouldn't say that I was involved, but was certainly downtown. When some of the Fed stuff was happening, and engaged in some other protest as well. When I could make it out. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Portland's an interesting place in terms of the culture here. I mean, one of the things that I think that's interesting about Portland is that um, you know, shows like Portlandia and everything else, I think have kind of painted Portland as like this like progressive like hub, more or less. But when you really look at like the history of Oregon, I mean, it was essentially formed as a white supremacist state. I mean, there were laws, well into the 20th century, that like, black folks couldn't uh, reside here. I mean, like basically they were trying to create white utopia. And it's kind of unfortunate because I think, even though Oregon and Portland in particular get a have this reputation of being super progressive, in many ways they did kind of create a white utopia. I mean, like something like 77, I can't remember, 73, 76%, percent white, like in this town. I mean, the um BIPOC population here is incredibly small, and I think that was something that like I really struggled with going from a border city where essentially I was the minority in that community to going to a community where it's like, oh my god, now everyone all of a sudden looks like me. um, but all that's to say that because there's always been such a heavy presence of like white supremacists in the area, kind of like the outlying areas, that like Rose City Antifa was like the first anti-fascist like contingent of people like in the United States. Essentially, like it was the first organization to call themselves anti-fascist in the US, and a lot of that was to combat like all of these boneheads in the area or whatever that were causing problems for the minority communities here. So there's always been this like underlying protest culture in Portland, and certainly like this summer it just blew the fuck up. I mean, we became um the target of nearly the entire kind of like collective consciousness of like the conservative movement or whatever. It was so wild to hear Donald Trump essentially talk about like people in Portland should be imprisoned for life, and like everything he was saying, and I'm like, you're talking about me and my friends. Like like these like you're talking this is no longer like theoretical. You are like targeting me and my community. And I don't know, it was a wild time. I mean, the funny thing about it is that like I think Portland found itself in the news because the federal occupation and everything that was going on around that. But the truth of the matter is that like the that was almost like a side mission in a way. Like that happened because the Portland police force is so incredibly brutal, and people were fighting them and protesting against them long before federal agents started firing at people. And after the but the feds brought thousands of people out. The nights that I was out there were upwards of, I think, I don't know, I'm not good at this, but like 5 to 10,000 people
Wow.
out every night. They brought people out, but after they kind of retreated, they're still here, but they don't have the same kind of like presence that they did at that time. Numbers started to dwindle, but there's still frequent direct actions here. Things are still happening. It's just not making the news in the same way that it was.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I probably was rambling there, but there's a lot to say about it.
No,
But
no,
it wasn't.
that was very
It
interesting.
was. It was a difficult time to dealing with the pandemic, dealing with the police brutality and everything that was going on in the city. I mean, it was like looking back on this summer, I mean, I would never want to relive that again. I think that like you know depression, so depressed, so anxious, so angry, engaging in like unhealthy coping skills to just try to get through the day. You know it was not it's just tragic, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm proud of my city, I guess. I mean, the fact that that many people showed up and fought back against, white supremacy and authoritarianism and fascism, essentially, is the silver lining, I guess, in all of
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we wrap things up, I just want to give you an opportunity to maybe say a few words, maybe talk about what you have coming up, and just a final thought.
Sure. Well, so I think I already mentioned, I mean, Neighborhood Brats has a new record coming out that I'm incredibly excited about. It's called The Confines of Life. This is their third, I think. Their second under Cult. Um, and it's awesome. I can't wait. Also, Needles and Pins. This is their fourth LP. This one's going to be self-titled coming out. This is their third record, I guess, under Cult. And so, you know, they're good friends from Vancouver, Canada, who I'm really excited to share this record with. Um, it's it's another really good one. Got a new Bothers record scheduled for sometime this year. Really great local Portland band, you know, who kind of blew me away live, and kind of like, I released their last LP and was just like, um, I mean, they're phenomenal. They're great, and I haven't heard anything that they've done so far because they're still in the studio, but I can guarantee it's going to be awesome. And then a little bit later in the year, I'll also be doing a record from a new Vancouver band called Schedule One. Um, they I don't even think they've ever played a show, because I think they started right before the pandemic happened, you know, but they were able to record like this pretty amazing like 7 songs. It's members of like Dead Cells up there, Bishop's Green, and some other bands. Really good stuff. Excited about that, but no one knows who they are, and I think, you know, there's probably like 5 people who have maybe heard these songs, but they're killer. There's a few things kind of hanging out in the background. There's a lot of stuff at this point that I've kind of told people, like, I really like this. I don't have the bandwidth for it. Why don't you hit me up in like June or July and we'll see where I'm at?
Right.
So, you know, there may be other stuff coming up. Those are the like for sure things that are happening this year, and I'm really excited about all of them.
Awesome.
Um, yeah, and I don't. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I appreciate you taking the time to allow me to just ramble to you about whatever.
No, I really enjoyed
It's
talking
been
to you,
fun.
listening to your story, and um, I think your story is very rich, and I'm glad we were able to have a conversation about it.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Ryan.
So I want to say thank you, and please be safe and have a good day.
Yeah, you too.